Okay, welcome to the Expansion Podcast. I'm your host, David James, and we are here for the Expansion, which is a group of fans of the Star Wars Expanded Universe, which has recently been rebranded as Legends. It's the original canon of Star Wars that went along with the 6 movies. Now we got like this new canon coming out, and they decided not to continue the original canon. Well, we're a bunch of fans that want more of the original canon. And like I said, I'm your host, David James. My co-host over here is...
James the Gungan Puzo. Hello.
All right. Weezer like you. Okay, so anyway. Yikes. But anyway. Each time we do this podcast, we're going to be talking about different things regarding Star Wars, the expanding universe, the expanding universe movement, the expansion, what we're doing, and just various things. Today we're going to actually talk about the Old Republic era, the Old Republic era is a really neat era that spans a lot of time in the Star Wars timeline, for myself, I've read, a lot of the comic books like Tales of the Jedi, Knights of the Old Republic. I've read some of the novels like Revan or Revan. I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce that. I've heard it pronounced a couple different ways. Revan. Okay, thank you, James. All right. So I've read some of the novels like Revan and Deceived and the Darth Bane trilogy. This is a really great era. But one of the things that really defines this era is the games, the video games, and right now we're looking at a time when even though the original canon has been canceled and they're only doing new canon stuff, we got an Old Republic game currently coming out with some new content with this, even though they've canceled the original canon. They are still coming out. So this is the only thing from the Expanding Universe and Legends that can still be considered new material. And I've never really played the games, but James here has. And so, James, why don't you tell us about these games, and why don't you tell us what makes them so fascinating to play, and how much you enjoy them?
Okay, sure, I can tell you some stuff. So, the first one came out in 2003, I am tempted to say, and it was called Knights of the Old Republic. Knights of the Old Republic is an RPG or role-playing game series that's been developed by BioWare. Took place 4,000 years before The Phantom Menace, I believe. Might be counting that wrong. And this is a game that completely shook the whole gaming medium by its core. It's always been kind of argued whether or not games can be considered art or not. And, obviously as the medium's developed, storytelling has become a bigger part of it. But, one thing about a lot of the storytelling aspects in a typical video game, they usually require a lot of interruption and just watching, kind of like a film, being more cinematic. The irony of Knights of the Old Republic being based on a cinematic franchise is that this is a game that understood maybe you don't need to tell your stories that way, and introduced an interactive element to everything. You, the player, are a very active participant in this story. You can make your own avatar, you choose whatever your character says. Brilliant stuff. It has one of the most epic twists I've ever seen in a game ever. 12-year spoiler, cover your ears. By the end, it turns out you are this infamous Darth Revan that everybody's so afraid of.
So would you say it's kind of like almost living your own movie in a way?
Yes, it's quite a lot like that. It's like that, only you're much more of an active participant within the story, Yeah, it's just like that. Revan is whatever the hell you want him to be under the mask. He's basically an insert for you, and you get to live you get to experience the Star Wars universe through the lens of this infamous amnesiac Sith Lord.
Cool. Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
well, I tell you, because I read the book, and I remember, when I was reading it, it was a very, even though Revan was, a male in the book.
He's the only thing you had that's decided about him is that he's kind of male by default, and certain facial features are going to be there.
Yeah, and there was just like some different. He was like very vaguely done, but yet he was very much there in the book, and so it was kind of. I always felt like there was so much more about him that I should know, but I guess that was the way the book was written on purpose because of what
Revan is. He's whatever you want him to be.
Yeah, so that's pretty cool. I mean, that's pretty neat. Yeah, because I never did play the game, and I'd heard people that had played the game, complain about the novel because, they were like, oh, but I did not have him be that way, or I'm a girl, so it was a girl that I did instead of a guy, and so yeah, I mean, I guess, but when you have to write a novel, you got to pick one.
Yeah, so. the mediums don't always translate over that well, but you do the best you can.
Yeah, but definitely, wow, that's great. So what? Tell us about some of the expansions and some of the things that influenced the other novels of it.
Well, okay. I own this game. I haven't had a chance to play it yet, but later on, a few years, BioWare couldn't do it, so LucasArts hired Obsidian Entertainment to make a sequel to Knights of the Old Republic, which some people like it, some people don't. Generally, it's viewed as kind of a disappointment. And then, much later, just I think 4 years ago, I think it was, BioWare got back in the game and decided to make a new Old Republic story simply titled The Old Republic.
Okay.
In this one, you can play as either a Jedi Knight, a Sith warrior, or I forget the more mage-ish Force wielder terms. Do excuse me, I'm a little brain dead.
There's a lot of terms out there.
Yeah, there's 4.
No.
Basically. I think it was, yeah, Sith Sorcerer it might have been, something like that. And it tells the story of Darth Vitiate and Malgus and the war against them. It takes place, I think, a few centuries after the first Knights of the Old Republic. And the initial campaign ends when you beat him. But later on, since it's the 21st century and you can just download new things into an existing game, they decided, why not expand on this? So they made a new one called the Hutt's Gambit. I'm sure they've made others in between this, but I think just last year they made a new one called Shadow of Revan, which kind of ends Darth Revan's story arc from what I understand.
Oh, that's interesting.
And, yeah. And just this past year, I think just this past month or so, they just made a new one. I stupidly forget its title, but I think it was called Knights of the Fallen Empire.
That sounds about right.
Yes, and it is a brand new Legend story. It's the first one we've gotten since Shadow of Revan last year. And it's going to be updated, I believe, monthly in chapter increments until next year.
Okay.
So no one really knows what the future holds for the Old Republic games after this, but it's certainly exciting that they're making more now, and if the fan demand is there, I'm sure they're still going to continue it.
Yeah, and the thing is that for those who are fans like you and I of the expanding universe, and people that are fans of the expanding universe that want more expanding universe and are gamers, this is the game to be involved with. I mean, I'm really excited about the fact that it's out there. I've just never been one of these people to get online and do those massive multiplayer games. I mean, I thought about it and
it's a huge time commitment. It's huge time commitment.
that's the thing, and because I've looked at a few, and was even at a gaming convention recently, and it's very impressive, the detail that goes into games, and all the thinking that goes behind it, and stuff. I'm just really amazed at this kind of stuff. But at the same time, as a player, I just I would have time doing that, because I would suddenly be abandoning a lot of things that are very important to me, and I just couldn't do that. But I know that there are people out there that love this, and definitely, if you're a Star Wars Expanded Universe fan like we are, and you're a gamer like James is, then get involved with this game and show your support for the Expanded Universe. This is the best time to do it. This is time to really let them know that we not only do we want more Legends, but we'll support it. And so definitely get behind this. So James, tell me, what are some of the different books and comic books that you wound up reading, that was in the Old Republic era, maybe something surrounding the games. What are some of the stuff that you've
Well, it's totally unrelated to the games. It's its own little story, but it shares the same title. Just this past December, I believe it was, when Dark Horse was doing their little farewell thing, I managed to pick up the first 6 issues of the Knights of the Old Republic comics. Really good stuff there.
A very good comic book.
Oh, yes, totally. Really, I really loved how that really captured... It was a lot of prequel themes, I guess, irony, the dangers of trying to see too far, knowing just enough to get yourself into trouble without knowing enough to know what's going to happen.
Right.
Great stuff. Zane Carrick is probably already one of my favorite EU characters, great protagonist there.
Yes, definitely.
Definitely something I'm going to definitely have to see about picking up the rest of, but, just those first 6, amazing stuff.
Definitely as it moves forward, there's definitely more stories to tell. And what I really liked was when the Knights of the Old Republic comic book was able to kick off the Vortex crossover, because you had this crossover that happened where you had this character that through some different means of hibernation was able to survive some of the different eras. So she started in the Knights of the Old Republic era, but then she went to the prequel era, Rise of the Empire, and then she wound up over in the Rebellion era with Luke Skywalker. So as a result, it was almost like kind of an extenuation or continuation of the other era, because Darth Vader was in both eras. And then you had where fast forward to Legacy with Cade Skywalker, and oh my gosh, that the way they wrapped it up was just amazing. So I mean that was just an era covering multiple eras. That was a story covering multiple eras right there, and it just really showed the way that the expanded universe really interconnected, and that was, in a way that hadn't really been done before, because there have been stories told in different novels that kind of hinted toward things to come, and then you had the fruition later, but to actually see this story that took place from one end of the era to all the way to the other end of the era was just, the timeline. I said era, but one end of the timeline to the other end of the timeline. I mean, it was just an amazing journey throughout the year that this occurred, because each part came out, over a 12-month period. It was a 12-part thing. So you had the first 4 parts in Knights of the Old Republic. Then you had 2 parts in, I believe it was the Dark Times, and then you had 2 parts in the Rebellion, and then you had the other last 4 parts in the Legacy with Cade Skywalker. But yeah, just so seeing that full story was just a really great thing to see. Now, one of the other comic books that I liked to read back before they came up with Knights of the Old Republic was Tales of the Jedi. Kevin J. Anderson was a big part of Tales of the Jedi, and that's actually where we first saw a double-bladed lightsaber before we saw it in film with Episode 1 and Darth Maul.
Yes, that's so cool. I actually remember hearing him talking about that. He just thought it was so cool to see it on screen, even though it's not exactly how he used it.
Yeah, it was great. I mean, and the whole Dark Lords of the Sith and the Sith War and all that stuff. I mean, that was just the most amazing reading the Tales of the Jedi. And I was only able to catch like a few issues back in the 90s, but then I was able to get a whole bunch more recently, where I was able to get some before and some after, and I was able to get the even bigger picture of it, I don't know, about 2 or 3 years ago, I guess. And it was just, that was always just an awesome story to read, was the Tales of the Jedi, and read about Ulick Qel-Droma and Exar Khan and Frida Ned and Nomi Sunrider and all that stuff. I mean, that's just great stuff. I love that storyline. I love that era. That's just a really, really good reading right there. And of course, the Darth Bane trilogy and the Jedi versus Sith comic book that ties in with that first book in the Darth Bane trilogy. Now that was some really good reading, because I remember I read the Jedi versus Sith trade paperback, and when I got to the end, and Darth Bane selected that little girl, I was like, oh goodness gracious, oh my goodness. I was like, oh my goodness.
The first
I'm like, what's he gonna do with her? And it's like, oh my goodness. So then sometime later I read the trilogy of books, and the way that the author Drew Karpyshyn was able to take elements from that Jedi versus Sith and incorporate it into his novel there, and then continue the story later in the book 2 and book 3. I mean, that was, basically, for those of y'all that don't know, and I won't ruin anything, I'm not going to throw out a spoiler like James did earlier, but basically, Darth Bane is the one who comes up with the rule of 2. There was a whole bunch of Sith Lords at one time and a whole bunch of Jedi, and so Darth Bane is the one that decided that there should only really be 2 Sith, a master to embody the power and a student or apprentice to crave the power.
Right. And
so as a result, a lot of people died on the Jedi and Sith side. Let's just put it that way. And the comic book was named Jedi versus Sith for a very good reason. But yeah, I mean that's all a part of the Old Republic era too, which I mean, that just, if you hadn't read that yet, it's definitely something worth picking up.
Well, yes. The story of Darth Bane is, quite frankly, one of the more important Star Wars stories outside, like, the films, for sure.
Definitely.
In fact, I think Lucas himself contributed to conceiving the character, didn't he?
I think he did, yes. From what I'm understanding, I believe he was definitely a part of that. Of course, the thing about Lucas was that he was a major part of pretty much everything that occurred in the expanded universe. I mean, as it was coming out, it was the official canon of Star Wars that, was coming out. And so as a result, everything had to go by him. I mean, anything that was questionable, they went to him about, and he would either say yes or no. And that was the way it was from the very beginning, all the way through, and until he signed off. But yeah, so but Darth Bane is a very awesome character. You got to read that trilogy if you hadn't read it yet, the Darth Bane trilogy. And so definitely get that and read it. Get the Tales of the Jedi comic books as you can find them. You may have to get the omnibuses if you can find those. Go online, Amazon.com, eBay, your local comic book shop, various places. Go to some different cons.
Because you can website has the Legends comics now.
Yeah, you can find vendors at various conventions and stuff. There's all sorts of conventions, like the one we're having. We're having one in March for the expansion, for Expanding Universe fans to show up, for people that are interested in finding out more about the original canon of the Expanding Universe, for people who are interested in Star Wars and wants to know more beyond the movies. There's so much that goes on in the Expanding Universe, and so we're just basically having a convention where people can come together and just enjoy being around people that are talking about the Expanding Universe, and that's what we're doing in March in Atlanta, March 11th, 12th, and 13th at America Smart, and the link is below, and you can click on it, and definitely get there, attend, and you're going to find yourself surrounded by a bunch of happy, enjoyable fans that love the Expanding Universe and want more of the original canon. And so if that's you, then definitely come and join the rest of us there. And that is, once again, in March in Atlanta, March 11th, 12th, and 13th. So yeah. And we will be, and when you come to the convention, we'll be having different panels and different things like that. Which one of the panels will actually be about the Old Republic, and we'll be talking about that at the convention. And so come and find out more about the Old Republic. So including the video games, I'm sure we'll be talking about that, and so that'll be a very enjoyable time for anybody that is wanting more Expanding Universe.
Very well then. So, do you have anything to add about this massive era, sir?
Well, at this time, there's so much to say, but really, what it comes down to is, if you haven't read anything in the Old Republic yet, or if you haven't experienced the Old Republic yet, then pick up some novels, pick up some comic books, and get to reading. If you're a gamer and you haven't played the Star Wars Old Republic game yet, now's the best time to get into it and show your support for the original canon of the Expanding Universe.
Without the expansions, the 2011 game is free on PC now.
Okay. Well, that's good.
So, yeah, just download that thing.
So there you go. There you go.
Get done. There's more.
Oh, yes, definitely. So that's it for the Expansion Podcast this time. So click the subscribe button and share the link with other Star Wars fans, and come back next week where you can hear us talk about some other eras and some other things going on in Star Wars, the expanding universe and the expanding universe movement and the expansion. May the Force be with you. Always.